Hi, my name is Libby Myers. I'm a guitarist and doctoral candidate here at the Conservatorium.
And I'm Kathy Grant. I'm a music lecturer and researcher at the Con. And Libby and I have come together this morning as a part of a video series that's led by the Queensland Conservatorium Research Centre of the fairly new Creative Arts Research Institute here at Griffith University. And in this video series, staff members and higher research degree candidates come together to talk about some shared interest in relation to their creative practice and their research. So it's lovely to be with you, Libby.
You too. So today we're meeting here in South Bank on the unceded lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people, and we want to pay our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in this place of knowledge sharing and meeting.
So Libby, when we met a few weeks ago to talk about what we might talk about today, even though our creative arts practice and research is quite different on the face of it, we came across a shared interest or curiosity in the words that we use to talk about our research and our creative practice. So the importance of words and the language that we use to describe ourselves and our practice, and also some of the challenges and maybe even the risks of using certain ways to describe those practices and ourselves. So that's the topic that we've landed on today, and I wondered whether you might like to start just by telling me a bit about why that topic resonated with you.
Yeah, I guess as a doctoral candidate writing a thesis, words are kind of always on my mind, having to get that word count up, but also as a practicing musician and releasing an album, and I've had to, I guess, sort of categorise my creative outputs. When you load something onto Spotify, you say this is classical, or this is jazz, or this is country music, whatever you want. And that's also, I guess, what my research is about as well, is identity and the ways that we identify ourselves. And of course, language is a big part of that. All of those different words bring up very different images and conjure up ideas about different particular things. So that's how I sort of arrived at that kind of interest in that topic.
What words would you use to describe yourself, your creative practice and your music?
Yeah, well, I play guitar, and the guitar itself lends itself to so many different styles, and you find it all around the world. I guess I've been identifying myself as a classical guitarist for a long time, but the music that I play now is really quite broad, and I've been working with jazz composers and more experimental composers, so it's been, yeah, a really interesting time to, I guess, stretch those boundaries of what genres and identifications we use.
So in some ways, now the term classical musician or the label classical musician doesn't suffice for you, in a sense.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Which is sometimes a difficulty when we find ourselves in institutions that teach classical music.
Yes.
And we study classical music, whatever that means. Yeah.
All of that resonates with me, I guess, in that what I think I hear you saying is that sometimes the words we use to describe ourselves, they can become labels, and sometimes those labels in turn can become identities, but our identities are always evolving. And in any case, the way other people see us is not always the way that we see ourselves.
That's right.
So my area of research interest, my main area of research interest has been how communities around the world can keep their musical practices strong in the face of a very fast-changing world. And I've decided to position most of my research in the area of ethnomusicology, which I think of as simply the study of music in its social and cultural context. And I belong to ethnomusicological professional organisations, and I publish in ethnomusicology journals, and I go to ethnomusicology conferences. So in a sense, it's very reasonable, I think, for other people to think of me or refer to me as an ethnomusicologist, but it's actually a label that I try not to use for myself. And one of the reasons, I suppose, for my discomfort with it is that in wider academic circles, no matter how ethnomusicologists might define the term or their discipline, in those wider ethnomusicological circles, ethnomusicology has come to be seen often as the study of the music of other cultures, other in quotes, and largely that means, in that perception, the music of non-Western cultures, which is very problematic for many reasons. It immediately sets up that power differential, that divide, and others, a whole group of people, of course. And so for that reason, largely, I and some of my colleagues in the discipline of musicology prefer to refer to ourselves in different ways, and I've chosen to usually to refer to myself simply as a music researcher, which of course then invites the follow-up question, what kind of research is it that you do? And then I'm able to explain at more length or in terms that sit better with me what it is that I do.
Inviting the follow-up questions is really a great way that we can use our own words to describe what we do. And the terminology is something that has been on my mind, especially when we're looking to publish places. We have to choose our 5 keywords, the things that are most important to that particular article, or those tags that kind of locate us in a particular field and what discussions we want to belong to.
That's true, Libby. I think, again, in my area of research, one of the topics of interest in the last decade or so in the field of ethnomusicology has been the sustainability of musical practices or traditions. And one of the terms that ethnomusicologists have been quite reluctant to use in relation to musical practices has been the term endangered, which is one that linguists use very commonly for languages. They refer to endangered languages. But ethnomusicologists have been much more reluctant to use the term, and there are very good reasons, I admit, in certain cases for avoiding it. So one charge against it is that the term can be paternalistic, or it can overly romanticise the situation of some of these, potentially so-called dying musical cultures or practices. And another argument against it, I think it was an ethnomusicologist, or should I say music researcher, Libby Myers, who said that calling a musical practice endangered can be like yelling out avalanche on a snowy mountain. It can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, that if an ethnomusicologist calls a particular musical practice endangered, then it can actually bring it about. So I agree that there are some very good reasons why sometimes great caution should be taken in referring to a musical practice as endangered. But I'd also argue that in certain circumstances, and where it's warranted, that we should call a spade, and to refer to music endangerment, I think, much as I've noticed some news media outlets in recent years committing to using the stronger language of the climate crisis and the climate emergency rather than simply climate change, I think sometimes we should have the courage to use strong language, not least because, as in those instances in relation to the climate, but also in relation to cultural loss, it can draw attention to the scale of the problem and the urgency, the imperative to do something about it.
Yeah, there's that power of language, urgent language, that leads to more consciousness about that issue, which leads to more action being taken. And that kind of brings to mind a lot of discussions that I've heard and I've seen about people, researchers who describe what they do as advocacy versus activism. people find the term activist helpful, perhaps because they find that action is being taken as a result of their research, versus advocacy, which perhaps is more of a discussion and an exchange. Both can be helpful, I'm sure, but it's an interesting dichotomy with that language there.
That's a really good point, Libby, and of course that relates to one of the interests both of our research here at the Conservatorium and of our new Creative Arts Research Institute, and that is the social potential, the capacity of music making and artistic practice to make a real contribution to improving the lives of people and to improving the planet. So I think that could probably be a whole topic of another conversation, but maybe we should leave it there for today. But it's been a real pleasure to have a chat with you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.